What's shaking, my friends? My name is Shay, and today we're going to talk about what I read in the month of September. Let's talk about September really quick. So I did take vacation in September for 6 days. During that 6 days, I read 1.5 books. The rest of September was wild. So I participated in a challenge for my book club, and I love doing those challenges because not only does it help me to meet new people and all of that, I'm very competitive, so I like to compete in challenges, period, but I get to meet people and I really get to read some books that are outside of my comfort zone, and sometimes I find very real gems and then other times it's not so lucky. And this month was a bit of a mixed bag, a very mixed bag for me. Part of the problem is in a challenge, as I said, I'm very competitive. So I am reading just as many books as I can, as fast as I can. And sometimes that hinders my enjoyment of a book. So very much, I think a lot of these mediocre ratings are due to the fact that I read the books too fast and I just wasn't in the mindset, because after I read so many books, my brain just gets fried and then it gets like turned into autopilot where I'm doing the motions, but I'm not really physically in my mind there. So if that makes any sense. We will get into these books in just a minute. I did do a vlog where I read 7 books in 7 days, and I meant to vlog the rest of the month, but I didn't. But I let you know. I will link that video down below, and I will let you know if any of these books are in that vlog, because 7 of these books will be, and I'll be more in depth there. So let's start the chat. So like always, I am going to start my books, talk about my books in the from lowest to highest. So that's what we're gonna do. I quickly want to talk about how many books I read. I read 23 books this month. 23 books, that's a lot. The 23rd book, I did read a majority in September, but I will say that I did finish it in October. So that was a total of 9,160 pages. Yes, you heard me right. Now 9,160 pages. This is the most pages I have ever read in my life in a month. So yeah. And I had an average rating of 3.45. Real quick, I do want to mention a book that I did read this month. That is The Garden of Empire by J.T. Greathouse. I read it this month. It is the sequel to The Hand of the Sun King. I gave The Hand of the Sun King 5 stars. I loved that book. I can't tell you a single thing about The Garden of Empire. It was one of those books where I had pressed play on the audiobook and it just ran and I didn't know what I was reading. So I'm not going to rate that book, and I'm going to reread that book at some point in the future because it is one of my most anticipated releases of the year. So, but we are now going to chat about the books I do remember, the books that I did read, and how I felt about them. Alright, here we go. Coming in at the lowest rated of the month was, I finally read, coming in at 2 stars, Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. So listen here, it was a short book, and I was like, everybody's talking about this book, maybe I'll read it. All I knew about was, you know, alien smut. That's it. That's all I knew. And everybody talks about this and raves about this whole gigantic series. It's like a whole long series. No. So this book is about this group of humans, girls, that get kidnapped, abducted by these aliens. And these aliens are not nice aliens. They are mean aliens. Trigger warnings for rape. Specifically, they're not nice aliens, and something happens. I can't really recall what happens, but they have to basically abandon these human girls on a different planet, not their planet, but on a different planet, because something happens with the ship, and they have to leave to get some supplies or whatever, and they're going to come back to pick up the girls. And then so the girls know that they have to get away, hide, do something before these aliens come back to get them, and that's when they explore this new planet and they find these new aliens, and there is a lot of smut in this book. And honestly, I found a lot of it very laughable. I did not find the dialogue was cringe. The smut was cringe. And I swear to God, like, I will forever remember the word quee, and like, I can't even take anything seriously if you say quee. Like, I don't know why, but I laughed, and that's all I have to say about that. It was 2 stars. Will I continue on in this series? I don't know. One day, one of these books might fit a challenge I need to do, and so I may continue on, but it was the worst read of the month. So, now, that's the only book I rated 2 stars. Now let's get into our 3-star reads. Okay, the next book is going to be Rules of Civility by, I think it's Amos Tolles. Listen, I am not a historical fiction fan. I don't read that genre, so a lot of that's why I had issues with this book. This is just not my genre. Is this probably a very good book? Yes, but not my genre. So this, basically, we're in the head of our one main character, and she has a best friend where they're rooming together, and then they go out one night and they meet another gentleman, and so basically they become this threesome friend group, and it's all about their journey, and then something tragic happens and kind of departs the friendship of this group, and it is us getting to see how that affects our main character's life and how she deals with it emotionally. And my problem with this book is there's not really a ton of plot, and that's my problem with a lot of books. Like, great, I'm living this girl's life, I'm seeing where she's going and what she's doing and the fallout of some things and some choices that she makes, but like nothing was really there to draw me in to really want to keep reading, and that's why this was a very low 3-star for me. I can see why people do love it, but it was just not a book for me. I would be interested to kind of read some more works of his, but I am not quite so sure, but I'll have to think on it. The next book is The Girl Who Used to Know by Tracy Garvis Graves. This is my first book by Tracy Garvis Graves, and I ended up giving it 3 stars. I just did not connect with the romance of this book. This is a second chance romance. They met in college and dated, and then they fell apart, and now they meet again after a lot of years, and they've come back together and realized, you know, they want to be together. I was not convinced with this romance, and the big thing about this is that the girl has autism, so that may be something that a lot of people are interested in, but I just didn't connect with the characters, I didn't connect with the story, and I didn't buy their relationship, and so that's why it got a 3 stars for me, but I can see why people like this book. The next book that I read was Where Roses Never Die by Gunnar Staalesen. I do not know how to pronounce that name, I'm really sorry, but this is a Nordic noir book. It's like the number 18th in the series that I had to read. I talked about this more in my vlog of where I read 7 books in 7 days, so if you want my in-depth thoughts, you can go there. But this basically follows our detective, and this child has gone missing a long time ago. I want to say it was 25 years ago, and this mother is coming back and begging him to reinvestigate the case because the statute of limitations is coming up on that case, and the case is about to go cold and it will never be reopened again. And so it's kind of that journey. I personally don't do well with detective stories. I used to read a lot of them, but I just kind of got out of that genre, and it was fine. It was a great mystery. It was fine, but I just don't really care for a detective POV story. And this is going to be some shots fired to some of y'all. Coming up next at 3 stars is going to be Kingdom of Flesh and Fire by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Listen, I actually really liked From Blood and Ash. I gave it 4 stars. I was very surprised at that book, and I have really defended that book on some of the criticisms that it has. But let me tell you, Kingdom of Flesh and Fire was literally a lot of pages. It was 600 something pages. I don't know how many pages it was, but it was a lot of pages of repetitiveness and the same thing over and 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 over. And here we go over and over. And then finally something happened to the last few pages. A lot of books are like that. And if you like the series, I'm not knocking you. I'm very sorry that I just didn't enjoy this installment in the series. Will I continue on? I have no idea. I do own the audiobooks of the rest of the series, so maybe I will continue on just to see if the next book gets better, because I feel like there were some good things happening at the end of the last book, but we'll have to see. It's not in my immediate future. It's not something that I really want to continue right this second. The next book that you can really get my in-depth thoughts on in that 7 books in 7 days vlog is going to be Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. I said in that video vlog that this book at times infuriated me, and made me want to give it 1 star, and then at times it really excited me and I wanted to give it 5 stars. And I met in the middle here and gave it 3 stars. This is a second chance romance story. Again, they meet when they are kids, they grow up, friends to lovers, and then something happens and they come apart, and then like 10 or 11 years later, they haven't spoken in 10 to 11 years basically, and then they come back together and meet each other and again. So there are some issues with the story, and there are some different, not tropes necessarily, but different things that I do not like in books. And without spoiling the story, this book had that in it. And I could not. I said, nope. But interestingly, even with that thing that I hate in books, I really loved this couple. I love these characters. I thought that the romance was real. It really felt, they had a great connection, and I really liked their love story. I do think that our protagonist, our female protagonist, had a lot of immaturity going on. And that's all I'll say. I don't want to spoil the book, but I did end up giving it 3 stars. The next book that I read was The Sky and the Deep by Adrienne Young, and I basically said that Adrienne Young is just not an author for me. I have read her The Girl the Sea Gave Back, which I really didn't like. I also read what are the books with the girls on the cover? Namesake is the second one. I like the first book in that series, but I didn't like the Namesake as much, and I just don't know if her writing style really vibes with me, but I had to read this book for a challenge. I was made. And so I was shocked that I didn't hate this. I didn't hate this. So this follows our main character, and she is the daughter of basically a clan leader, and there's 2 clans at war. And they are going into battle, and you know, she's fighting against the enemy clan, and in the enemy clan fighting, she sees what she thinks is her brother, and her brother supposedly died years ago, and here he is alive, and why is he fighting with the enemies? And so that's what starts off our story, and of course this is going to be mainly a love story. I liked it. I liked it fine. It was very compulsively readable. There was nothing wrong with it. It was just okay. It wasn't anything groundbreaking, but it was okay. And I was actually shocked at how much I didn't dislike this book. And now I'm really going to break some hearts, because next coming in at 3 stars is a booktube darling, and that's going to be Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. So listen to me when I say this. I truly believe that when books are hyped up, and when everybody on, you know, social media or YouTube or any kind of interview platform, TikTok, whatever, it starts this sensation of people reading books and, oh, I have to rate this book 5 stars because everybody else did, and I fully believe that's why this book has 75 stars. I don't quite understand the super high ratings on the book. It's a fine book? Absolutely. I gave it 3 stars, which means it was fine. I didn't hate it. But do I think that it lives up to any kind of hype that it has? Absolutely not. So I know that this is like, you know, a cozy fantasy. I've never read a cozy fantasy, so I have nothing to compare it to, and it may just be that that is not a genre for me. I'm not sure. But this basically follows our main character, Viv, and I think she was like she fought in the wars, mercenary, whatever kind of type person, and she has retired, and in her battles, she discovered coffee, and so she sets up in a new town, and she decides to open up a coffee shop, and it is her basically gathering the people, the quirky people, and it's gathering the found family of these people to run this coffee shop with her, and of course, there is a small tad bit of a romance in here, but like the characters were fine. But I don't know that there's no plot in this, really. It doesn't have a plot, and I guess because I have to have some kind of plot to move us forward. I do like character-driven novels. I do like found family. I do like all of that, but I also have to have some form of plot, and this doesn't really have any, but I do like the characters, and so I gave it 3 stars, and I'm really sorry that I didn't like this book as much as everybody else. The next book I read was a reread, and that's going to be Lingus by Mary Zapata. This is not a Mary Zapata that I would recommend to everybody. It's a 3-star read. Some of the dialogue is very cringe. This is the first book I think she ever wrote. But it basically follows this girl who likes porn, and she goes to a porn convention, and of course she falls in love with a porn star, and it's that kind of like, what are the repercussions of falling in love with a porn star, and for both the non-porn star and the porn star. So anyway, it's fine. I reread it because I needed something during my reads that I could just go through that I had already read. So I just had to break up these books with a book that I had already read. So then next I read Sometimes I Lie by Alice Feeney. So this is about a woman who wakes up from a coma and she has no idea what happened to her. And it's kind of flashing back and telling us the events leading up to the coma, and it's kind of going back and forth between present day and past day. And I thought this was fine. I thought this was nothing groundbreaking in a thriller. So if you don't read a lot of thrillers or you haven't read a lot of thrillers, this might like thrill you. I'm not quite sure. It did have a kind of twisty turny thing going on, but I had figured it out long before the twist came. So, but I read a lot of thrillers, but I do think people that don't read a lot of thrillers would like this. So, and the next one I read was The Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. I also talked about this in my vlog of 7 books in 7 days, but this basically follows our main character, and she is a true crime blogger, I think, and she basically, there's this crime in her town that happened a long time ago about this lady that basically murdered these people but then got acquitted, and she has not come out. She's a recluse. She stays in her house, and one day she sees her at a doctor's office for a doctor's visit and asks her about interviewing whatever, and the lady says yes, and she interviews, and we get the actual true story of who killed these people and what happened way back when, and did she actually do it or did she not. Simone St. James, I've only read The Sundown Motel, and I feel like these books kind of have very similar vibes and a similar tone. I know it's the same author, but I still really like differences in my books. I don't know. I may give Simone St. James one more try, but I just don't know that she is a great author for me. So next, I'm gonna probably break some hearts about this book as well. This is a classic. This is a very long book that I read in September. I do remember reading this book. If there's any book that I remember reading, it's this one specifically. And that's going to be Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name wrong. I'm really sorry. But I read this book. I've never read a Western in my entire life. And this is 960 pages of Western. It is a classic. It has a 4.5 rating on Goodreads. There's like 170,000 reviews. And bada bing, bada boom, I read it. I gave it 3 stars. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. This basically follows our group of men that own this cattle ranch, and they basically decide to locate somewhere else to Montana, and it is the journey from, I think they live in Texas to Montana, and how they get there, and the journey and what things happen during the journey. And then there is this woman who is a whore who one of the men falls in love with and takes on this journey, and then there's multiple characters that are obsessed with this girl even though she's a whore. Anyway, I don't know how else to describe this book. It's basically just like I said, they're journeying to Montana, and so you get a lot of talk of men wanting to poke whores. I am not quite sure what the alert is on this book. I will tell you that I read 960 pages of these characters. I got attached to the characters because I read about them for 960 pages. So did I get sad at points in the book? Absolutely. At the end, did I get sad? Absolutely. I mean, as you should. But did I really enjoy the journey to get there? No. I just don't understand the appeal to this. There's a mini-series. I'm going to watch the mini-series. I really want to watch that and see how the adaptation went. But this is a beloved classic, beloved book by many, many people. And I'm not going to rain on their parade anymore. I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. Now we're going to start my 4-star read. So I read Symptoms of Being Human by Jeff Garvin, and I'd never heard of this book until it was one of the books recommended to me about gender fluid identity, and this is about a gender fluid teenager who is trying to figure out who they are and how to come out and the repercussions of all of that. And I really liked the story. I loved the journey that they took to get to where they were going. I then found out that this book is by a cis male author, so it's not on Voices for sure. And I would just caution that. I've heard it's not terribly good representation, but then I've heard from other people it's pretty good representation, so I'm really quite not sure. But just be aware of that. But I did read it. I thought it was good, and I gave it 4 stars. The next book I read, and a book that I've been wanting to read for a very long time, is going to be A Man Called Uve by Frederick Bachman. And I really enjoyed this book. This is not in a genre that I usually read. In fact, Frederick Bachman does not write books in genres I read very often, but his writing is always so compelling and so like fantastic, and his plots are great that I always get wrapped up into his storytelling. And this follows kind of a grouchy old man, and it is his story of finding people and having people love him despite him being grouchy, and how that can mend a broken heart. And so I loved it. Did I cry in this book? Yes. Trigger warning for suicide and all of that. If you have a lot of mental health issues, trigger warning. But I loved it. I sobbed. I cried. And I definitely want to read more of Frederick Bachman in the future. Then another book with trigger warnings for suicide and mental health is going to be All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven. And I have had this book on my TBR for quite a long time. It's been sitting on my shelf, and this was a perfect opportunity to read this book. So this follows our two main characters who both are suicidal, and we kind of get some snippets into both of their lives of what has happened to make them this way and their mental health, and it's the love story between the two. This book got a lot of buzz a long while ago. I like this book. I've heard again, this is another divisive book where people say this is great representation and some people say this is not great representation. I personally think in mental health, you cannot say whether or not this is a good representation for mental health, because everybody has different mental health, and what may be not good representation for your mental health does not mean that it's not a good representation for somebody else's mental health. There is a vast variety of mental health illnesses. I personally enjoy this. So, but just keep in mind that this does deal with mental health and suicide, so it may not be a book for you if you don't want to read those topics. Then I read Dread Nation by Justina Ireland. And I just thought this was fantastic. I normally don't read historical fantasy, and the reason I just don't like the same thing about historical fantasy about historical fiction. I just don't like historical things. I don't know. But I read this book, and this is kind of like a zombie book where African Americans are kind of put in trained to how to protect people, white people specifically, against these zombies. And they're going to protect the country and all of that. And our main protagonist kind of is a troublemaker. She does things that normally are not okay, that are not in good standing, and some things happen. And she realizes that things are not quite what they seem. There is a new way of life here, and she has been taught this whole time that the zombies are under control because they're murdering them, they're killing them, they're learning how to do this, and things just aren't quite what it seems. I don't know how to else describe this book without spoiling it, but I thought it was fantastic. If you like post-apocalyptic kind of zombie type books, I would recommend this one. Then there was The Push by Ashley Aldrain, and this follows our main character, and she doesn't know if she wants children or not, but she meets this man, this lovely man who she falls in love with, who really wants kids. So she decides to have a kid, and when the kid is born, she's just not attached to the child. She just doesn't want anything to do with it, and then some mysterious things happen. And so in the book, we're trying to figure out, is the child actually evil or doing wrong things, or is the mother actually the one that's evil and doing wrong things? And it's definitely a great exploration of motherhood. And anyway, I really enjoyed it. I would highly recommend The Push. Then is another thriller book. That is going to be The Arrangement by Kristen Moglen. I do not know how to say her last name. I should, but I don't. I also talked about this book in my 7 Books in 7 Days vlog, but this follows a married couple who basically comes to this agreement that they are going to basically have an open marriage sexually. So they're going to go off and have sex with other people, and that's the arrangement. And I can't tell you much more without spoiling it because it is a short book, but there are so many twists and turns in this book. You'll think you know what's going on, and then boom! It gets turned on its head, and then you're like, okay, so now here's what's going on, and boop, then it gets turned on its head. And I loved it. There's 2 more books in this series that I will probably continue on with. I really recommend it. So I loved it. The next book is going to be a series that I finally completed, and that's going to be A Sky Beyond the Storm by Civility. Now listen here. I do think I read this in the wrong month. I think that it's September, and I was trying to read really fast, and this book kind of wasn't, I don't want to say it was a disappointment. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was fine, but I think I would have enjoyed it had I have slowed down and taken my time with it. But I highly recommend this entire series. If you're a young adult, or if you're an adult and you're looking to get into adult because all you've done is read young adult, I think this is a good YA book that feels slightly adult. It leans on the higher side. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the love story. I enjoyed these characters. I'm sad to see them go, but this is a book that I can say is probably one of my favorite YA series, you know, of all time. I'm confident in calling it that, but I gave it 4 stars. The next book is going to be The Darkness Outside Us by Elliot Shriver. So I thought this was just going to be a male romance. I really did think that that's all that this was going to be. But it turned out to be so much more than that. This follows our main character, and he has won some kind of trials to be able to go and rescue his sister. His sister has gone onto a mission to one of Saturn's moons, and she's missing, she's dead. We don't know, but he has been chosen to go on this mission, and then when he wakes up on the ship, he doesn't remember getting on the ship. He doesn't remember taking off, the launch, anything, because he's basically been asleep and he doesn't remember even getting on the ship. And so not only that, but this was supposed to be a solo mission, and then he finds out there's another passenger on board. And so who is this passenger? Why are they here when it's supposed to be a solo mission? It's kind of like a sci-fi mystery male romance, if that makes any sense. I love these characters. I love the romance. I loved everything about it. And I gave it a I would give this a very high 4 stars. The only thing that kept this from being a 5-star read for me is because I didn't really like how it ended. But overall, this is one of my favorite books of the month, for sure. A book that I just finished up reading that I read mostly in September, but finished in October, is going to be And I Darken by Kirsten White. Now listen here. I have had this book sitting on my shelf forever, and I picked it up on a whim. I was like, you know what? Let me read this. I've heard some people say great things about it. I've heard some people say not good things about it. This is a loose retelling of Vlad the Impaler. And guys, I give this a high 4 stars. I think this was great. This is great YA, and the reason I say that is it's right up my alley. It's just political fantasy, and I love it. I love political fantasy. So this story follows Lada and her brother Radu, and they are basically the children of this ruler of this part of the empire, and their mother doesn't really care for them, and they are raised by this very mean man. And one day the enemies come and basically take them away to the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire says, you can go back and have your, you know, rule where you're coming from, but we're going to keep your children for collateral. So if you go against us, if you try to do anything to harm us, we will kill your children. And so that's where the story basically starts up, as these children being raised behind enemy lines, basically, and they meet the son of the ruler, and they form this bond and this friendship, and then things kind of go awry. And anyway, I liked it. I loved it. Again, we're doing a lot of political maneuvering in this book, a lot of politics. This is a trilogy, which I didn't realize going in. I thought it was a duology, but it is a trilogy. So I'm looking forward to the series. I gave this a very high 4 stars. We'll have to see how the story goes. I did think that this book dragged in some parts, but overall, I really like it. I liked it, and I would recommend it if you like political YA fantasy. And my favorite book of the month, and one that I talked about a lot in my 7 Books in 7 Days vlog, is going to be Saving Noah by Lucinda Berry. This is the only 5-star read I had this month, and this follows our mother character, and her son has been arrested and charged with molesting these young girls. And I think he was 15 at the time, 14 or 15 at the time that he molested these girls, and they were very young. And it's just how that tears apart a family. How do you deal with, as a mother, having a child that has done something so atrocious? Do you still love him, or do you not? And anyway, there was some twists at the end as well, and I think Lucinda Berry is a psychiatrist, and so that kind of brings even more elements into the story. I truly adore this book and highly recommend it. It's highly recommend. Also, I cried in this book. There were tears. So yeah, I recommend it in all. If you want to cry, yes. If you want something that is kind of an exploration of people, sure. This did have some twists, yes, at the end. So, I mean, it was all in all a really great book, and I would recommend it. So that is all that I read in the month of September. Isn't that enough? I think so. I'm really excited to get into October. I think October will be such a great reading month for me. I'm able to take my time and kind of slow down and read some things that I really want to read. And I'm looking forward to what's gonna come in October. I'm ready for all of that. So let me know what you guys read in September. I'm interested to know. Maybe I will find some books that I like. And I hope you guys' reading month went better than mine. And I hope you have a great reading month in October. And I will catch you guys later.